Hello friends, Jennifer Pearson here, Thistle Gypsy, with another deck interview. I'll try not to let it glare too much. So this is the Wild Kuan Yin Oracle, not a new deck by any means. Typical, I'm just catching up, doing some fun deck purchases. So this wasn't on my wish list. It actually had been, and then I took it off. So it's another one that I was wishy-washy about. I kind of have problems with decks that are less than 52 cards. So I think that might have been the reason I took this off. Or it seemed like a lot of the images maybe looked the same. But since I'm in a buying spree, I was just... From the beginning, I was very attracted to the imagery, and I think I thought, oh, well, that's just going to be another pretty deck that I don't really connect with. And so I didn't want to take the risk, but I did now. I am jumping in, and I'm glad I jumped in. I really like this deck. I do have issues with it, but I think that I can't go wrong with it in that the images are so attractive and beautiful, and they're not really evocative, they're just beautiful. And that even if I decide that this is not a deck I'm going to work with, and as an oracle deck, I would totally send these cards to friends. I would just put them in an envelope and say, hey, here's your Sacred Sherpa Guides You Beyond card. And would enjoy every minute of sending it to friends. But I am going to give it a chance as an oracle deck. I did feel as I was first looking at it that it might be even a sort of a healing deck for me. Now, I wouldn't normally say that I lack wildness, but I have had, because of my Lyme disease, to trim things back. And there are a lot of messages in this deck about resting, allowing yourself to rest. And I think I really need to hear that. So there you go. So, in the process of having Lyme disease, where you have fatigue, I kind of have gotten to the point where, or at one point, and I'm not completely over it, got to the point where needing to take a nap during the day or for a couple of days in a row or something like that was threatening to me, because it's like, oh my gosh, here it comes, I'm going to have to relive the trauma. It's, my Lyme disease is resurging, and it does, and I do have to be aware of that, but that doesn't mean that I can't rest in the old way I used to rest, which is, you just take a nap in the middle of the day, and it doesn't really mean anything significant, except that maybe you needed to rest, or maybe it would be good to rest. So yeah. But the primary beef I have with it so far, and I've read, there must be a deluxe version or something, because this is what I got for a guidebook, and I think for me this is plenty. I don't need more than this. I saw somebody who reviewed this deck, and they had a thick, like 3 times easily the size of this thing, and the larger, a really beefy version of this guidebook. I honestly don't feel that I need it. I feel like there's more than enough in here to provide the meaning of the cards. If you are somewhat of pagan leaning and you are wanting to connect spiritually with Kuan Yin, maybe that bigger deck, and I don't know if that was a deluxe edition or something, it might be something that you want, but that's really not my intention here. And I think that might have been the reason that I was put off a little bit from this deck, among the reasons, just kind of little things chipping away at my initial enthusiasm for the images, was some criticism about whether this really represents Kuan Yin as one person or one culture might see it, as opposed to another. One question I have about this deck, because of the way it's been cropped in various images where there's like a little something showing up that you're like, why don't we see that? You know, so I don't know if these images were produced specifically for this deck or if they were taken from the artist's art. So that's a big question in my mind. Not that that's a bad thing necessarily, but it might explain a lot of the repetition of the imagery, because some artists, they will, you know, they're on a yak jag, you know, and so they're, you know, that's what they're painting. They're obsessed with a certain color of red or whatever, and that's their prerogative. That's what they need to follow, their instincts as an artist. So and I love this art. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. It's luminous. A lot of the colors. This artist is wonderful. But there is a lot of similarity in the various images. And I'll get to that here in a minute. There's also, we'll go through and I'll talk to you. I've ordered the deck in a specific way, and I'll talk to you about that. And it has to do with the similarity of the images and then picking out some distinctions. So this deck has been ordered according to some distinctions that I was seeing in the deck when I kind of flipped through it a couple of times. But let me just finish with the guidebook. Here is the guidebook. So you get a little grayscale image. You get kind of, what'd you say? Is this kind of the card speaking? Kind of. Or maybe this is Alana Fairchild speaking. And then they have guidance, which feels a lot to me like a lesson. But anyway, guidance. And inner reading, which is kind of the card meaning inner reading. And then a healing process. If you want, you know, she'll have little things to say and, you know, things to chant or repeat or whatever. So, you know, I think there's really lovely intention in this. And I've read, just to kind of get a feel for the deck, and I will, I think, read all of this. But there is quite a bit of repetition in the messages, which ends up being, you know, are there subtle differences? I'm sure there is. But assuming I keep this deck, and I am assuming that, I will probably go through the guidebook and just make, kind of like I went through the deck, just kind of make little marks in the book. I probably wouldn't highlight a book like that, but make little marks for what that cards, in looking at the cards, what her meaning kind of resonates with me in terms of the card image for me. So I will do that. Now, before doing this video, I had intended actually to go on and look up the story of Kuan Yin. I can't remember exactly what her story was, but that was part of my question with the very youthful images in here. There are some older people, really beautifully rendered older people. Elderly, not older, elderly. But there's like a complete contrast between people in their 20s, what look like their 20s. It might be a stretch to imagine some of them in their 30s, to people in their 70s. And there are some small children. So I kind of wonder if this isn't a particularly good deck for a teenager. Because you'll see that the images are just very useful. And there is some point in the guidebook where she mentions, you know, that this is kind of good for one's inner child. It seemed like I was going to say something else, but maybe not. So, a couple of things, just looking at this particular card. Can I get the glare off of there? There we go. So one of the things I was looking at, and I may go back and do hair, look at people's hair, because sometimes their hair is more free, sometimes it's braided, and I don't know if that's a cultural thing. In some cultures that indicates what stage of life that you're in. Whether you have your hair up like her, or whether you have it hanging loose, or whether you have it in a braid, those things indicate a stage of life. And I haven't kind of studied that in this deck yet, but it's something that could be studied in terms of differences between the cards. So this I've done because this character wearing this dress appears more than one time. The other thing to notice here is these birds are probably falcons. So the animal totems of this deck are falcons and the yaks. So there you go. The other significant thing here is this railroad, and it's got the red signal. And I think all of the railroads, all the railroad images have that kind of negative stop kind of thing, and she's obviously defying the railroad here. So when I saw that, I was really curious about the railroad imagery in this deck. And so this is Sacred Sherpa guides you beyond. So it's like she's leaping to, quote unquote, the other side of the tracks. However, the artist in the back talks about how he, and this is him, there you go, Wang Yiguang, or however you say his name. It says right here, the Qinghai Tibet Railway. He closely followed the construction process of the Qinghai Tibet Railway and the evolution of New Tibet. So the one that he's mentioning here, I think, is it the Qinghai? I don't know. There's more than one fairly recent engineering feat in China. And I can't remember if this one is the first one or the second one, but it might be the first one because it goes through that high plateau area that railway does. And again, it was an engineering feat. So I looked up this railway because I was curious about it. So as an American, my association with railroads in wild areas is that it is bad news, because if I were to grab the Prairie Tarot, I could show you the Ten of Swords in the Prairie Tarot is a buffalo that has all of the swords in it, so a dead buffalo. Then in the background you see a train coming through. So in other words, laying that railway, it allowed a lot of people to come in and allowed a lot of settling. Everybody wanted to bring in cattle. It was the end of the natural, you might even say integrity, the natural integrity of that land. And it was also because the Native American tribes were reliant upon the buffalo and that land staying in integrity. It was the collapse of a lot of their lives, their traditions, everything. I mean, destroying everything, really. So, you know, I see the railroad as a threat because of my own cultural background. Just being North American, I know what happened here and what the purpose of a railroad was here. Now, so I wanted to look this up to see what the attitude toward the railroad in this deck might be, or the rail. You know, he was closely following these things. It doesn't say why. It doesn't say because he was concerned about this disruption of the way of life of the people along the railroad. It doesn't say if he was fascinated because it was a technological engineering feat, which it was. It's interesting. I found a video about, actually from an Indian man, as in from India, and talking about, it wasn't, I don't think it was this railroad. There's two now. There's one that crosses the plateau type area, and that was an engineering feat in part because of permafrost, and so it's, you know, keeping it stable was an intellectual challenge to keep something as heavy as a railway from collapsing. And then he also, and this is what I was, when I was looking at maps and I saw the railway and where it was headed and into Tibet, and I think, well, you know, I think if the Chinese is generally being strategists, as not necessarily doing this and spending huge amounts of money for no strategic reason. And that's why this guy, this Indian man, was in fact looking at this and explaining this, is that he was looking at this railway's capacity to carry troops into Tibet, into Lhasa, and what the actual potential for that was, and then the threat, because India's on the other side, right? So it was just really so this railway is complicated. This railway is complicated in here, but I think it adds some depth to the deck to understand that, and I haven't heard anybody speaking about that, and the guidebook doesn't speak about it. I don't know if the expanded guidebook does or not. I'm sure that was not Alana Fairchild's intention, was to get regional or cultural politics kind of mixed up in this, but I think it adds to the deck rather than detracting from it. Because, you know, here's our goddess leaping over the railway, and so to me that has significance when you understand the potential changes that may come along with that railroad. So I'm going to go through some of the cards, and again, I just have them, I'll probably go through all of them. I like to do all of them. And again, this I've chosen because of her dress. And there she is again, and here you have a dam, and I don't know what dam that is. This is the only time this rear end appears. I don't know if it's an ox of some kind, that's my assumption. But this blessing of the kite dancer is supposed to be about progress and kind of the stress and benefits of progress. And here she is again. I think this is the last time. I think she's only in 3 cards. Sorry about the glare. How can I get it off? I guess I need to tip my cards that way. And it doesn't want to focus on her very well either. Okay. And now we're into, so you can get some seasonal type of messages out of this. And I don't know if there's cultural significance to a white yak in the same way that there's cultural significance in the Native American plains tribes in terms of a white buffalo. But it's the white yak that's all over in here. But the seasonal aspect is this. So again, I was looking at what they were wearing in large part to kind of sort them. And so these are the ladies who are Kuan Yins, who are fully coated. They're dressed all the way up onto the shoulder. So I'm taking this to be winter. And there she is. Oops, there she is again. Yes, nobody has seen this before. There are some horizontal cards. And there's the falcon, and there are some sheep. But the sheep are often kind of hidden. There's the yaks again. And our levitating goddess. Youthful goddess there protecting. It looks like a yak is falling off a cliff or something, and she's there to save it at the last moment. But again, kind of the cropping of some of these images makes me really wonder. And so here, up here, you see that red? There's that railway signal again. And there's your falcon, a card dedicated to the falcon. So you see how she has a braid. Her hair is actually loose in the back. Oops, I guess I can turn these right side up again. And there's another sheep friend. But again, it's like in this image, there's another sheep that's in front of her, and you can't even see that. So that's part of what makes me wonder where the images are coming from. Okay. Again, you can see it's snowy. She's all bundled up. They're having a good time. So now we're entering another clothing phase. So this could be spring or it could be fall. And again, I don't know if this signifies something in their culture, but she has her coat jacket on halfway. So she has it on here, but she doesn't have it on this arm or this shoulder. And you'll see clearer images of that in a minute, if I can get the glare off of the cards. Okay. Here you can see, you see how she's wearing it kind of half off or off one shoulder. This looks like it's still winter or snow, but you know, is it spring, is it fall for them, or is that signifying something about her? There's a falcon up there, we have the ox way over here. So there she is again, and this one is actually, she's traveling on the railroad. So you know, railroads, as well as negative things, they indicate rapid travel, and this is supposed to be a blessing coming to you rapidly, is essentially. And you see she has loose hair there. Also, this particular railroad is the highest railroad in the world. Actually, both of the one that has been built and the one that is being built. I think the one that's being built is even more so. And so that's an interesting association with a goddess. In other words, you're traveling on the high road. You're traveling, in fact, on the highest road. What they're and you know, you can think of the deck as a fast track, so to speak, a fast track to a certain level of spiritual attainment or something of that nature. The railroad that is currently being built and won't be finished until about 2025 is being bored through mountains for the most part. So they said that 80% of it is either a tunnel or a bridge. So not very much of it is sitting on lowland. So so there you go. You're taking the highest road. This deck is trying to get you to take the highest road and to overcome all obstacles, because that's essentially what they're doing. If it's 80% tunnel and bridge, that means that it's 80% obstacle. Their path that they're using for this railroad is 80% obstacle. Oh, goodness. Okay, let's see if I can get glareless again. I think here she's grabbing the ox by the tail, or the yak, whatever it is. Again, falcons and yaks. More flying goddesses, and then again, you see you've got this, and you've got your guardian right here. It says guardian watches over the west, so an older guardian here, as she takes her direction, making sure nothing comes from this direction that will be problematic. Here she is again. Now we have both shoulders off. Is this one? See, now we have both shoulders are off. Both arms are free. The statements down here can be a little obtuse, but I think that that can be read by using them. What I'll do is I'll read through them really quickly at the end here. Since my webcam is not picking them up very well. There's also, you know, there's this yak here, and again, this was reminding me of native peoples, is that it's very clearly that this person is of the yak people, that again, a lot of their clothing, or you might say their most important clothing, actually comes from this animal. So their relationship with it is extremely close. Sisters of the Red Tents. I was just reading about this card. It's kind of a card of initiation. That red could signify menstruation. I get the feeling that it comes from that kind of place or ceremony. But the meaning has been expanded, but still. And so this is the reds. We're entering the reds. So the reds, for the most part, are not as heavily clothed as these other gals that we've been seeing. So maybe they can be thought of as the summer. You know, I don't know. But here are the reds. The girls in the red dresses. She's got that winter jacket on, but it's completely open. It is winter there in that scene. There's the falcon again. Here's the sheep in her braids. It's such a funny looking. And these shadows are all falcon shadows. Oops. This is a rare appearance of a bird that does not look like a falcon. It's a swallow of some kind. And that's actually in the title here, actually, Sisters of the Spring Swallow. Since that says spring, maybe this red is supposed to represent spring. I don't know. And this is Sisters of the Sacred Spiral. Maybe it should be Sisters of the Sacred Braid. Here we are again. Now she has the headdress of the person I started with, but not any of the other clothing, I don't think. So we do have some other colored yaks. Here's a black yak. And this again, whoops, it's like that is one. This is supposed to be, whoops, this is supposed to be the mother, I'm guessing. Remember me, the divine mother within. That does not look like a mother to me. She also looks too young to be a mother. But again, I'm coming at this from my Western U.S. viewpoint, where you're not quote unquote supposed to get married. You have at this age, whereas certainly an awful lot of 13-year-olds in the world, and even younger, could get pregnant and become a mother. But this is not my idea of either a divine mother, because she isn't old enough. She just doesn't feel mothery to me. And maybe that's my own age that's influencing me there. And that is a big part of what made me curious about looking up Kuan Yin's story in terms of any sense of how old she was when she achieved her goddesshood. Blessing to begin. Now this one, she looks like she's back, yep, having one on the shoulder, so I got this one out of place. She's got one on the shoulder and one off. The coat on the shoulder and off. This is kind of its own words. I think we've entered the cards that are kind of their own individual thing, although we haven't come to the cards of the elders yet, so we'll see. And here they are. Cards of the elders. So this is, I think, fascinating and beautiful. Kind of, I'm guessing, sort of looking at each other in a mirror, or looking at each other across time. Now, I don't think that young people can look at their face and see how they're going to look when they're old, but certainly she could look and have some sense of what she looked like when she was younger. But I just like it as face to face and doing the same thing, and kind of the younger girl mimicking what the older woman is doing. It's just a very evocative card, I think. And this is grandmother. Okay, so this is grandmother, and this is water down here. So you really have to look at the background kind of carefully, because it only gives you little hints. And so she's leaping from land into a boat that's on the water. And this is grandmother ensures safe crossing. So crossing from land into the boat. And look at these old faces. Alright, ancestral guardians of light. And that cute little girl there, holding a staff of some kind. And then here we have another one where the older person is wisely, I think, because again, if you look down here, you have a bunch of spent sunflowers, and she has something in her hand, and she's grandmother dragonfly. You see all the dragonflies there, and she has her hands cupped, and I suspect that as the younger woman flies free, she is collecting the seed. She holds the wisdom. This, I don't know what that animal is. If that animal up there is a sheep, that's kind of what it looks like to me, as a little lamb. Desert harvest. Again, I would call that a little bit ominous. Are we saying, so the idea behind this card is that even in the worst of times, you'll kind of be given a gift or a way through it. And this lamb coming forward is kind of like offering its life, is my assumption there. And then lastly, a card that's an anomaly in terms of the rest of the deck. The slave dances into freedom. To me, this is very outside of any of the other cards of the deck. And I haven't read about it closely. But anyway, there is, I've got another long evaluation review of the Kuan Yin Oracle. So I'll read through these really fast because I need to put them back in reverse, back in the other order again anyway. So the slave dances into freedom, desert harvest, grandmother dragonfly holds the wisdom, ancestral guardians of light, grandmother ensures safe crossing, grandmother of love, granddaughter of life, holy sisters, blessing to begin, remember the divine mother within, hold on to me, anchor to fly. So in case you couldn't tell, this is a deck that's a lot about encouragement. Encouragement through any difficulties. And it's a lot about letting go of your initial intention, which I have some difficulties with. But in any case, it's definitely a deck of encouraging messages if you're to read the guidebook and use the guidebook. Sisters of the sacral, as in sacral chakra. Sacral spiral. So I don't know what the sacral spiral is. But anyway, there it is. Sisters of the spring swallow, good fortune granted. Harvest mother watches over me. Priestess of perfect pairing makes the match. Sister of Shambhala shows the way. Safe to fall. Daughters of the red tent. Above you, the lantern dancer. Let your world spin on its axis. The little one rises. And with all these yaks or oxen or muskox or whatever they are in here, you might think this would be a very Taurus-y kind of a deck. But since they're floating, I don't know, certainly beauty-wise it's Taurus-y. So I don't know. To me it almost has more of an Aquarian kind of a feel, but if you're a Taurus and you're really into your bullness, you might love the images of this deck. Wild Red Rider, blessing bestowed. Surrender, sensitive sister, be moved by the moon. And there are 2 or 3 moons. This is a reference to the moon as well. Blue Mother, Yellow Mountain, gibbous moon. And it does talk a little bit about it in here. So this is kind of reaching a threshold where things begin. All right, I won't go into it. This is already long enough. Fearless. Princess of red poppies. Her joy overcomes gravity. Be led by the path before you. Pray to the east, guardian watches over the west. grace in full flight. Her joy renders the impossible task possible. Lady of Lhasa descends. Blessing of the Kata bestowed. And there are explanations of words like kata in the guidebook. Her hand gentles the war, and their war is over the railroad. Play with me. The snow shepherdess. Sacred falcon shows the way. She rides with wild spirit unbroken. White mantra mother protects. She tames by laying down the staff and rope. Tender trust, beloved body. Princess of purity leaps across. Blessing of the kite dancer. And back to the first one. Sacred Sherpa guides you beyond. I'm going to set this one aside so I could put it with her similarly sleeved sisters. Anyway, I will put an end to this review here. And there you have it. My look and take on the Wild Kuan Yin Oracle at the beginning of my experiences with it. I have yet to do a reading with it. I'm more exploring it and sorting it different ways to get to know it and reading the guidebook. All right, everybody, take care. I hope this helps you decide whether this is a good deck for you.